What is up, Better Call Saul fans? So recently we've been getting spoiled with a bunch of new teasers that's been released within the past few weeks, and it's just been ripe for speculation and theorizing. So today I wanted to do a Jeff the Cab Driver video for Better Call Saul Season 6 Part 2 and what role he can play in the series finale. And just to address the elephant in the room, yes, there has been a recasting of the character due to scheduling conflicts with the actor, but honestly, it doesn't even matter. I mean, I'm sure it might take a couple minutes to adjust and then we'll all move on. Granted, it might be a little jarring on the rewatch of the series, but that's tomorrow's problem. So like I said, today I wanted to talk about Jeff the Cab Driver and what role he's going to play in the series finale. But before we get into that, if you can leave a like on this video and even hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with the latest content. So let's just do a quick recap on Jeff the Cab Driver and his relevance to the story. So in the opening of Better Call Saul Season 4, in the flashback, we see Gene Takovic get into a cab after leaving the hospital from passing out. While on his way back to the mall where his car is, he notices the cab driver has an Albuquerque Isotopes air freshener, putting him just a little bit on edge. And then he notices the cab driver looking at him in the rearview mirror and not really even trying to hide it, even to the point where Gene had to point out that the light was green. And the cab driver, who seemingly can't keep his eyes on the road, makes Gene nervous. I mean, obviously, right? And he just asks to get out at this random neighborhood and he'll just walk the rest of the way. And the cab driver either didn't hear him or just flat out ignored him because he just keeps going. And Gene says again to be let out. The cab finally comes to a stop and Gene exits the vehicle, and while walking away, he notices that the cab is still there. He then kneels down to pretend to tie his shoes to see if the cab would drive off, and when it doesn't, his breathing starts to pick up as he walks away, and the cab does drive off, eventually ending the scene with Jimmy getting back to his house, or Gene getting back to his house. And the next time we see those eyes, we see the fate that goes with it in the form of Jeff the Cab Driver in the opening of Season 5. A man who's possibly in his mid-40s, who's a Saul Goodman super fan with a whole lot of Tuco energy. Because he walks right up to Gene while he's on break in the mall and recognizes him as Saul Goodman, and then he starts to fanboy out. But with Gene, he tries his best to deny it, but Jeff is not going for that. And he just wants Gene to admit who he is and say his famous catchphrase. But when he sees a couple police not that far away, he just silently says, "Better call Saul." And Jeff tells him to say it again, but this time do it with a point. And to his dismay, Gene actually says it again with a point. Once satisfied with Gene's response, he formally introduces himself and even gives him a card and says, "Hey, you can call me anytime." Once Jeff walks away, Saul does call Ed the Despair, wanting to get relocated because he was made. But he changes his mind, ending the call saying,
"I'll do it myself."
But now that you're all caught up, the biggest question we have here is, what does Jeff really want? All that we really know is that he once lived in Albuquerque with his now ex-girlfriend and watched Saul Goodman commercials and even became a super fan. And then he moved to Omaha, Nebraska, which, I mean, what are the odds?
Approximately 3,720 to 1.
Never tell me the odds.
So here's what I think. Disclaimer warning. This video may be a bit of a reach, but in the Breaking Bad universe, anything's possible. So let's get into it. So like I said, Jeff has this big Tuco energy about him that makes me think that he may be an addict or a recovering addict who was addicted to that blue meth, and he had left Albuquerque to go to Nebraska to get away from this stuff. You see where I'm going with this? And Jeff knows that Saul was connected to Walter White, so when he sees Gene sitting down and recognizes him, he probably just gets a jolt and a rush and wants to get back on the stuff. So he might think that Gene/Saul can still get in contact with Walter White to get more meth, and he's going to use that same fact that Gene is on the run trying to hide his identity to his advantage. But maybe Saul just might take Jeff's fandom to advantage as well. It may be giving Jeff a call, and I'm using air quotes here, to set up a meeting with Heisenberg, because at this point, I'm not really sure where the timeline this takes place, because what we do know at this time is Walter White was only on the run for maybe like 6 or 7 months, and Saul already became Gene at that point. So maybe this could still be happening around that time where Walter's still on the run. So that's just wishful thinking. But what Saul's really going to do is ride with Jeff to a New Mexico desert to kill him himself. I mean, stick with me now. You've been here long enough. The only thing Saul has to lose at this point is his peace of mind. And using this teaser as a reference, Gene will likely dress the part in a colorful suit, slowly bringing back the color in his life in the white and black flashbacks. And at the same time, he does arm himself with a gun, hiding it in his back waistline. And then he calls Jeff to pick him up. A few minutes goes by and Jeff arrives. When Gene gets in, he immediately notices a CD on the dashboard with some crystal powder residue, and he sees Jeff bugged out and clearly high. A callback to Jesse Pinkman, of course, stealing his car and doing the exact same thing. Before Saul closes the door, he thinks for a moment, considering the decision and thinking about all the what ifs. What if we get into an accident? What if we get pulled over? What if they recognize me? But one thought comes in the loudest in his mind. What if he doesn't stop? And with that, he closes the door and drives off. Clearly at this point, Gene is making the slow transition back to Saul Goodman, but at the same time, he's still straddling that fence on what he wants to be. He could have just did a relocation and everything would have just been fine, but he just decided to take things in his own way and do things in his own way, the Saul Goodman way, the Slippin' Jimmy way. 2 hours passes by of Jeff just geeking out over Saul Goodman in the cab, bringing up all the past memories, his old commercials, his billboards, and even more excited to meet the great Heisenberg. And Gene, he's more quiet, but he's still being cooperative by answering his questions, but at the same time, he's just considering how and when he's going to pull the trigger. They then arrive at a red light, and Saul sees a police cruiser pull up to the side, and the officers give a glance at the cab driver. And Jeff looks back, but with a, "what are you looking at" kind of gesture, you know? The police notice this and take note of it, and Saul tries to calm him down. And Jeff listens and apologizes, rolling his window down to the cops, saying that Saul told him a really funny joke and that was the reason for the gesture. And in mid-sentence, the light turns green and Jeff drives away quickly. Saul looks back and he finds that the cops went from being on his side to now being directly behind Jeff. And while Saul's back is turned, we see Jeff pick up the CD and quickly crush some meth on the disc while swerving just a little bit, then snorting it, and Gene begins to panic, breathing heavier and heavier, and asking what's wrong with him, why would he do this now? And Jeff says in a joking tone, "What's the big deal? You're like my get out of jail free card, man." And his foot drops on the pedal just as the police sirens sound behind him. Gene's breathing is elevated as he's pulled into the seat cushion due to the sudden increase of speed. The chase didn't even last that long when the two are stopped with the pit maneuver by the police. And once coming to a stop, the cab is surrounded with police officers with their guns drawn. Jeff gets out immediately with his hands up, leaving Saul in the car confused, slowly comes to the realization that Jeff was an informant who set him up. Then that same suspicion was confirmed seconds later when they yell for Jimmy McGill to exit the vehicle. His heart is pounding and he's sweating through his suit because he knows he's been caught. He then thinks back to something that Chuck said about him destroying himself.
You that you have to make a change before it's too late. Before you destroy yourself.
He hears the police tell him again to get out with his hands up. He then feels that cold steel from the gun pressed against his back, and he pulls it from his back waistline and looks at the gun, and just hearing Chuck's voice echoing in his head, mainly the last conversation that they
If
had.
you're not going to change your behavior, and you won't, why not just skip the whole exercise? In the end, you're going to hurt everyone around you. You can't help it. So stop apologizing and accept it. Embrace it.
He presses the gun under his chin, and with the final police warning, we get a shot of the back of the cab and we see a bright red splatter of blood that covers the rear windshield, ending with a slow pan out as we see the police officer open the door and we see Saul's lifeless body fall to the ground. And that would be Saul Goodman's legacy, a criminal lawyer who could just never be clean. One who had great potential but squandered it, and a person who chose to always go the easy route and choose shortcuts over actually doing the work. Saul Goodman, we'll miss you. Hey guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I've seen some crazy theories out there about Jeff, and I just wanted to make one of my own and throw my hat in the ring. And feel free to let me know down below if you agree with this theory in your nicest words possible, of course, and I'll do my best to respond to them. Until then, my name's Gerald, but you can call me Merge. Later.